I almost didn't notice the envelope. It was sitting on my kitchen counter, tucked under a bottle of olive oil like someone had tried to hide it in a hurry. My daughter-in-law had been over the day before, helping me sort through some of Helen's old things. That's what she told me anyway. Helen had been gone 14 months by then, and I still wasn't used to coming home to a quiet house. 63 years old, retired from the post office after 31 years, and suddenly I didn't know what to do with my evenings. I picked up the envelope. It had my name on it, just Dad, in my son's handwriting. I almost opened it right there, but something made me set it back down. I don't know what it was. Call it instinct. Call it the same feeling I used to get when I was a mail carrier and a dog was behind a fence that looked too short. You just know. I left the envelope on the counter and went to bed. My son Philip is 41 years old. He works in commercial real estate, or he did, until things started going sideways about 2 years back. He married Renata. No, wait, that name's taken. He married a woman named Cassandra about 8 years ago. They have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, 7 and 9. I love those grandchildren more than I can put into words. My granddaughter has Helen's eyes. That's just a fact. Every time I look at her, I have to remind myself to breathe. Philip was never a bad kid. I want to make sure I say that clearly because what I'm about to tell you is hard, and I don't want you to think I raised a monster. I raised a boy who got everything a little too easily, and somewhere along the line, easy stopped feeling like enough. He called me the morning after I found the envelope. "Did you get a chance to look at those papers?" he said, and his voice was casual, too casual. "The way you talk about something when you've been rehearsing how to talk about it." "What papers?" I said. Brief pause. "The envelope I left on your counter. Cassie and I were over helping you sort Helen's boxes." "You were helping me sort Helen's boxes," I said. "Cassie was there too." "Dad," he laughed a little. "Yeah, we both were. The papers are just some financial stuff. I've been talking to an estate planner. Thought it might be good to get ahead of things, while you're healthy." Why you're healthy? I was 63 years old. I walked 3 miles every morning. I had my annual physical 6 weeks prior, and my doctor told me I had the blood pressure of a 45-year-old. But Philip wanted to talk about estate planning. "I'll take a look," I said, and I hung up. Then I opened the envelope. There were 3 documents inside. I'm not a lawyer, but I spent 31 years delivering legal correspondence to half the county, and I know what certain papers look like. The first one was a financial power of attorney form. The second was something called a revocable living trust amendment. The third was a letter from an estate attorney, a man I had never met, explaining that these documents had been prepared at the request of Philip and were ready for my signature. The trust amendment would have moved my primary assets, the house, my pension accounts, Helen's life insurance proceeds, into a trust structure where Philip had joint authority over distributions. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Helen would have known what to do. She was always the sharper one when it came to paperwork. I used to joke that she should have been the attorney, not the nurse. But Helen wasn't here, and I was sitting alone in a house that still smelled faintly like her hand lotion, holding documents that my son had left under a bottle of olive oil, while pretending to help me grieve. I didn't sign anything. I put everything back in the envelope, and then I called my friend Dwight. Dwight and I go back 40 years. We met at the post office on our first day of training, both of us 23 years old and nervous as cats. He retired 3 years before I did, and spent his first year of retirement going to every free seminar and information session he could find, which is how he ended up knowing an elder law attorney named Patricia Howe. "Call her," Dwight said, when I told him what was in the envelope. "Don't wait. Call her today." I called her that afternoon. She asked me to come in the next morning and bring the documents. I sat across from her in her office on Meridian Avenue. Small office, framed photographs of grandchildren on the desk, the kind of place that feels like it was designed to make you feel safe, and I watched her read through all 3 pages twice. When she finished, she set the papers down and looked at me over her reading glasses. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Has your son ever raised concerns about your mental capacity, your memory, whether you're able to manage your own affairs?" I felt the air go out of the room. "He mentioned once," I said slowly, "about 6 months ago. He said he noticed I'd left the stove on. Said it scared him, but I remember that day. I'd just turned the burner on to boil water and walked outside to get the mail. I was gone maybe 4 minutes." She nodded like that was exactly what she expected to hear. "These documents are legal," she said. "If you sign them, they're binding. But I want you to understand what signing them would actually mean. The trust amendment gives your son the ability to authorize expenditures and asset transfers on your behalf without your signature after a specified triggering condition." "What's the triggering condition?" She tapped the second page. "A letter from 2 licensed physicians certifying cognitive impairment." I looked at the page. I read the line she was pointing to. "He would need 2 doctors to say I'm not competent," I said. "He would need 2 doctors," she said carefully, "to put that in writing." I drove home and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes. Over the next 2 weeks, I paid attention to things I hadn't paid attention to before. Philip called me 3 times that week alone, which was unusual. Normally we talked maybe once a week, sometimes less. He asked how I was sleeping. He asked whether I'd seen my doctor lately. He mentioned, once, that he'd read an article about how grief can accelerate cognitive decline in older adults. He said it conversationally, the way you say things when you want them to land without seeming like they were aimed. Cassandra brought food over twice. She was warm and lovely and looked at me with a kind of careful attention I hadn't noticed before, like she was watching for something. I asked her about the kids. She said they were great. She said Philip had been under a lot of stress with work. She said that again, a lot of stress with work. I started keeping a small notebook, just dates and times and what was said. Dwight thought I was being paranoid. Patricia Howe did not. "Don't confront him yet," she told me on the phone. "Just keep the notebook, and I want you to make an appointment with your primary care physician, your actual doctor, the one you've been seeing for years, and I want you on record as cognitively intact. Ask for a full evaluation. Don't explain why. Just do it." I did it. My doctor, I've been seeing him for 11 years, looked at me like I'd grown a second head when I asked for the cognitive evaluation, but he ordered it. I passed with a score that put me in the top percentile for my age group. He printed the results and handed them to me. I made 3 copies and gave 1 to Patricia Howe. She called me the next day. "Something happened," she said. "I need to tell you about it, and I need you to stay calm." I gripped the phone. "I ran a routine check on some of the documentation your son submitted to my office. He'd contacted me separately, Mr. Whitfield, a few weeks before you came in. He told me he was looking for an attorney to help manage his father's affairs. He said his father had been showing signs of decline and that the family was concerned. He mentioned the stove incident." I sat down on the couch. "He came to my office," she continued, "and described you in terms that were, let's say, significantly different from the man sitting across from me when you came in. And he mentioned that he'd already identified 2 physicians who were willing to do the evaluation." 2 physicians. "Who?" I said. "I can't share that. But Mr. Whitfield, I reported it. I am an officer of the court, and what I believe I was being asked to participate in constitutes elder financial abuse under Virginia state law. I've filed a report with Adult Protective Services, and I've notified my bar's ethics board. This is out of my hands now, and I want you to understand that's a good thing." I didn't say anything for a long time. I was looking out the window at the bird feeder Helen put up the spring before she got sick. I filled it every Sunday. It was something I kept doing because it felt like a way of keeping her nearby. "Philip," I finally said. It wasn't even a question. It was just his name, sitting there in the air between me and the window. "I'm sorry," Patricia said. "I genuinely am." Adult Protective Services sent an investigator named Officer Renwick, a woman about my age, with close-cropped grey hair and the kind of quiet authority that made me feel like she'd seen everything and still chose to care. She came to the house. She sat at my kitchen table in the same chair where I'd sat when I opened the envelope, and she listened to everything I said without interrupting. When I finished, she opened her briefcase and laid out a series of documents. One of them was a printout of an email. She slid it across the table to me. "I'm going to need you to read this," she said, "and I'm going to need you to stay calm." It was an email from Philip to one of the physicians he'd contacted. It laid out, in careful and deliberate language, a plan to document what he called my progressive memory deterioration. It referenced specific incidents: the stove, a time I'd allegedly forgotten a grandchild's birthday, a conversation where I supposedly couldn't remember my own phone number. He had dates. He had details. Some of them were things that had never happened. Some of them were real events that had been twisted just enough to sound like symptoms. He had built a case against his own father over months. "Your house is valued at approximately $412,000, Officer Renwick said quietly. "Your combined retirement accounts are just over $300,000. Helen's life insurance payout, we found record of that too, was $140. That's close to $900,000 total in assets." I thought about those grandchildren. I thought about my granddaughter's eyes. I thought about Cassandra bringing me food, twice a week with that careful, watching expression. "Does she know?" I said. "Cassandra." Officer Renwick was quiet for a moment. "We're still investigating that part." They gave me a choice about how to proceed, and I thought about it hard. I could step back and let the investigation run its course without Philip knowing I was involved. Or I could have a monitored conversation with him. Officer Renwick's office would be present or available, where I confronted him directly and gave him the opportunity to respond. She told me that the second option sometimes produced evidence faster. She also told me it was harder. "I want to do it," I said. "He needs to hear it from me." Philip came over on a Sunday afternoon. He thought we were having lunch. I'd made chicken and rice, Helen's recipe, the one she used to make every Sunday when the kids were growing up. I did that on purpose. I wanted him to sit in this kitchen, eating his mother's food, and answer me. I let him eat. I let him tell me about the kids. I let him talk about work, about a deal that had fallen through, about how the market was rough. I listened to all of it, and then I set down my fork and I looked at him. "Philip," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." He looked up. Something moved across his face, just a flicker. He covered it fast with a smile. "Sure, Dad. What's up?" "I found the envelope you left on my counter." The smile held, but his eyes changed. "The estate documents. Dad, that's just— I told you, it's just some planning." "I know what's in them," I said. "I had an attorney look at them. Patricia Howe on Meridian Avenue. She had some interesting things to say." He was quiet. "I also had my cognitive evaluation done," I said. "Passed. Toppled my age group. My doctor was surprised I asked for it." I paused. "Were you surprised?" He set down his fork. He looked at the table. When he looked up again, his eyes were wet, and I felt something crack open in my chest, because he was still my son, and some part of me kept waiting for an explanation that would make this make sense. "Dad, He stopped, started again. "Things are bad. I wasn't going to hurt you, I just needed— there was a way to." "Stop," I said. He stopped. "I need you to understand something," I said. My voice was steady. I don't know how, but it was. "Your mother worked 30 years as a night nurse. I walked a mail route in the rain and the snow for 3 decades. Everything we have, every dollar, we built it, and I would have given it to you. If you had come to me and said, 'Philip, I'm in trouble, I need help,' I would have helped you. You know that." He was crying now. "Dad, I know." But you didn't do that. You went to attorneys. You found doctors. You built a story about a man losing his mind, and that man was your father. I had to stop for a second. I carried you home from the hospital the day you were born. You weighed 7 pounds, 4 ounces. I remember exactly what that felt like. The room was very quiet. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen, I said. I can't do that, and what happens next isn't up to me anymore. There are other people involved now, official people, and I'm not going to interfere with that process. But I wanted you to hear this from me, not from a letter or a lawyer. I looked at him. I love you. I will always love you. And I am so deeply, deeply disappointed in who you became when you thought I wasn't paying attention. He put his face in his hands. I got up and went to the kitchen to stand at the sink for a minute. I looked out at the bird feeder. A cardinal was sitting on it, bright red against the grey February sky, just sitting there like it had nowhere better to be. When I came back, Philip was still at the table. He wasn't crying anymore, but he looked hollowed out. "What happens now?" he said. "Now," I said, "you're going to get yourself an attorney, not for estate planning, for yourself, and you're going to cooperate fully with the investigation. And us." I thought about that for a long time. "I don't know yet," I said. "I think that depends on who you decide to be from this point forward." The investigation took 4 months. Cassandra, it turned out, had known some of it. Not all, but enough. She cooperated with investigators, and that cooperation mattered in the outcome. The 2 physicians Philip had contacted were interviewed. One had already declined to participate and said nothing, which was its own kind of cowardice. But he declined. The other had not yet acted, so no professional action was taken there. Philip was charged with attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult under Virginia Code Section 18.2, 170.2. He entered a plea agreement. No prison time, but 5 years of supervised probation, mandatory financial counseling, and restitution. He's not allowed to have any authority over my finances or estate for the duration of the probation period. I see my grandchildren every other Sunday. Cassandra drives them over. We don't talk much, she and I, but we're civil and we're honest, and I think that's the foundation we have to work with. My granddaughter still has Helen's eyes. I still have to remind myself to breathe. I updated my will with Patricia Howe. I split everything equally between 2 charities Helen cared about and a direct trust for my grandchildren, locked until they're 25. Philip gets nothing, not to punish him, but because I can't pretend the trust is still there. Trust isn't something you rebuild with paperwork. It's something you rebuild with time, with choices, with who you are on the days nobody's watching. He calls sometimes. We talk. It's not easy. I don't know if it'll ever be easy again. But Helen always said I was too stubborn to give up on things that mattered. She meant it as a complaint mostly. These days, I choose to take it as a compliment. I fill the bird feeder every Sunday. I walk my 3 miles every morning. I eat well. I sleep all right. And some evenings I sit on the back porch and talk to Helen like she's still out there somewhere, past the tree line, just a little out of sight. I tell her about the grandkids. I tell her the cardinal came back. And I tell her because I think she would want to know that her stubborn old husband still knows exactly who he is. I keep coming back to the envelope, not the documents inside it, the fact that it was tucked under a bottle of olive oil. Like that small act of concealment was somehow enough. Like if it blended into the counter, it would just become part of the house, part of my life, and I wouldn't notice until it was too late. That's the thing about betrayal when it comes from someone you love. It doesn't arrive announced. It hides in ordinary places. It shows up wearing the face of helpfulness, of concern, of a son who says he wants to get ahead of things while you're healthy. And because you love that person, because you have 30 years of memories tied to them, your first instinct is to find a reason it's not what it looks like. I almost did that. I almost talked myself out of calling Dwight. I almost left the envelope on the counter and waited to see what Philip said next. What I've learned, what this whole thing taught me, at a cost I'm still paying, is that doing the right thing is almost never the easy thing. It would have been easier to pretend I didn't understand those documents. It would have been easier to let Philip think he'd fooled me and just quietly change the paperwork on my own, without ever confronting him. But easier isn't the same as right, and I've lived long enough to know that the choices you make when nobody's watching are the ones that define who you actually are. Philip made his choices when he thought I wasn't looking, and I made mine when I realized I was. There's a version of this story where I don't call Patricia Howe, where I don't ask for the cognitive evaluation, where I let my grief over Helen cloud my judgment just enough that I sign something I shouldn't. I could have gotten there easily. Grief does that. It softens the edges of your thinking, makes you want to lean on the people who are still there, makes you less likely to question the motives of someone who says they're trying to help. I had to consciously choose to stay sharp, to pay attention, to keep a notebook and make copies and show up to that attorney's office and insist on understanding what I was actually being asked to sign. That's not paranoia. That's taking yourself seriously enough to protect what you built. And then the hard part, the part I'm still not finished with, is holding both things at once. The anger and the love. The grief of losing a son in a different way than I lost Helen, but losing him just the same. Philip is not gone. He calls. We talk, but something between us is different now in a way I don't have words for yet, and I've stopped pretending that words are going to fix it. What will fix it, if anything does, is time and choices. His choices, mostly. I can leave the door open. I can't walk through it for him. What I can do, what I choose to do every morning when I lace up my shoes and head out for those 3 miles, is keep being the man Helen married, the man who built something from nothing and knew its worth, the man who, even when the ground shifted, knew exactly where he was standing. That's not stubbornness, that's character. And character, I found, is the one thing nobody can take from you without your permission.